Joining us now on the Megacast, as he does each and every week, to talk about how the world of politics in the U.S. and the state of Michigan is affecting you, is Dave Dulio from Oakland University, professor of political science and also the director of their Center for Civic Engagement. Dave, Happy New Year, and thanks for joining us.
Happy New Year to you too, Tyler. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, appreciate having you on, and no better time than now to have you on, as we're already off to quite the kickstart to 2023 in Washington, D.C., where the new Senate has arrived and been sworn in. Not the case in the other house, in the other chamber of commerce, in the House of Representatives, where after their first day there yesterday, they are yet to name a new Speaker of the House, and what is quite unprecedented over the last century, just the first time in over 100 years that a vote for the Speaker of the House has gone to a second vote. Now we're looking at potentially today a fourth vote on this. So first off, let's just go from how this is impactful on national politics, because there are certain things that the House of Representatives can't do without the Speaker of the House.
Well, and it's a really good point, Tyler. And really the House can do nothing until it chooses a speaker. The rules mandate that no member elect is sworn in until the Speaker of the House is chosen. So there is no functioning House of Representatives at the moment. The Speaker has to be chosen, and then they will move to swear in all the members, even those who are returning. Like many of our reps here in Michigan, reps, Slotkin, Stevens, etc. They're not members of the House yet. They have not been sworn in for the 118th Congress, and that can't happen. The House can't do any business until the Speaker's chosen.
Yeah, and it seems that the problem here is between, like we've seen quite repeatedly over the last year or so during the midterm elections, between some of the establishment Republicans and some of the more Trump Republicans that are referring to themselves as the Freedom Caucus at this time, where the Republicans aren't able to get those 218 votes that are needed to put Kevin McCarthy or whomever else they may eventually put into the speakership, given that they have the majority in Congress. And given that these first three votes went quite differently, the first two votes having 19 Republicans not voting for Representative Kevin McCarthy from California, the presumptive nominee for the speakership from the Republican side of the House. First time 19 voted against him. The second time 19 voted against him by way of voting for Jim Jordan, a representative from Ohio, someone who nominated previously in that session Representative McCarthy for the position, and now that's at 20. Finally, they adjourned after that third vote until today. But this could be a big day for Kevin McCarthy, both good and bad, if he's able to galvanize the Republican Party and get himself into that speakership position. Or if this goes to another vote and he doesn't have votes or loses even more, this could create quite a lot of chaos to kick off 2023 in the Republican Party and really hamper Congress. So where does McCarthy go from here in terms of what he's got to do to make concessions with those 19? Or is this just simply a major power play from the Freedom Caucus to get anybody but McCarthy into that seat?
Well, it sure seems like the latter. The reporting out of Washington in the last week or so is that McCarthy and his leadership team have already made a bunch of concessions to what the Freedom Caucus wants. And it appears that it hasn't done any good, right? I mean, you've got those folks really dug in on their opposition to McCarthy. And you wonder what it takes to break it, or if it's just a flex on McCarthy saying, no, we're not doing it. We're anybody but Kevin, right? Is kind of where we're at. And is there a consensus candidate that emerges? Somebody like Steve Scalise, who might be able to, placate both sides, if you will, or do they look somewhere else? Jim Jordan, you mentioned, very popular among the Freedom Caucus, got 20 votes in the third round of balloting yesterday. But he doesn't want the job. And that wouldn't be the first time that somebody who said that they didn't want the job actually got the job. That's how Paul Ryan became speaker in the early 2000s.
We're joined by Dave Dulio on today's edition of the Megacast, professor of political science at Oakland University, and also the director of their Center for Civic Engagement. More information can be found from the Center for Civic Engagement on oakland.edu/CCE. And so as we're approaching today and this potential vote, fourth vote for the House speakership at 12 noon, this is critical mass for Kevin McCarthy, because right now he has, or at least up to this point, he's been in position to be the number one person in the Republican Party, at least in the House of Representatives, and one of the highest ranking Republicans in the entire union. And if this is the case where they do make concessions to the Freedom Caucus, the majority of the Republicans are making concessions to the Freedom Caucus and don't put Kevin McCarthy into that position. Now, this is the second time this has happened to him, where he's been at this point to potentially take the speakership and ultimately be snuffed out of it and somebody passing him in line. This might be his last shot at it. So what chance does McCarthy really have to recover from this, given that it's happened before, and given that he has a tendency to make concessions to those in political power, that ultimately is also one of the problems that these 19 originally and now 20 Republicans that did not vote in his favor really have against him?
Yeah, it seems like he's painted himself into a corner, right? And he, what's the way out? He's given concessions again by all the reporting that's come out, and so where does he go from here? Those folks aren't changing their mind. It appears, right? I mean, it will be very interesting to see what happens at noon. So in about an hour, right? What transpires? I read just before coming on with you that Republicans are going to try to not have a vote right away and go into a recess. Well, that certainly doesn't bode well for McCarthy. It's one side's going to have to give, and you wonder when other Republicans go to McCarthy and say, "Hey, look, it's not happening, right? You got to step aside." And then, of course, if that happens, the question becomes, what is there to fill that void, right? Who do they put up? As I said, Jordan doesn't want it, and he probably couldn't get the 218 votes that are needed. So we may be at a stalemate again for another day or so until something breaks loose.
And this isn't something that's uncommon in American history. It's simply something that we haven't really seen be a problem over the last 100 years. There's been, as you mentioned, situations in the past where, for example, when Paul Ryan rose to the speakership, where there was some disagreement amongst the Republican Party over who should be in that speakership, and ultimately Ryan, though somewhat reluctantly, rose to that position. But even that didn't go through several voting processes to then get to that point. This is something we haven't seen literally in a century in the U.S., but it's not uncommon in congressional history.
Yeah, and it reflects the divisions that are present in the Republican Party. And those divisions exist in the Democratic Party as well. They're just not being, the Democrats just haven't laid out their dirty laundry like the Republicans have. In 2019, in January 2019, when Democrats retook the House, there was opposition to Nancy Pelosi. But what many Democrats did is vote present. They didn't vote for a Pelosi rival. And if you vote present, that lowers the number of votes needed to attain the speakership, right? So there were some folks who said, "I'm not voting for Pelosi." In fact, when our representatives Stevens and Slotkin first campaigned for the House, they pledged not to support Pelosi, and at least one of them voted present in that speaker election. And what that did was, again, they fulfilled their pledge by not supporting Pelosi. But what it didn't do is stand in the way of Pelosi becoming speaker. So maybe that's something that McCarthy can convince people to do, not vote for somebody else, but just vote present. But even then, his Democratic opponent, Hakeem Jeffries, the Democratic leader, has gotten more votes because his party stuck together, and the Democrats have all voted for Jeffries, which have given him 212 votes, more than McCarthy has. So he's still going to have to convince a handful of Republicans who haven't supported him to do so if that strategy is going to work.
Dave, 2 minutes left, until we'll have to say goodbye today. And I do want to bring this up because it was something that caught my ear yesterday as I was flipping through the news channels while this was happening, it was on Fox News that I had heard this. I believe it was Greg Gutfield who had said, well, the reason we haven't heard about this happening in the past is because 100 years ago, we didn't have social media. We didn't have the 24-hour news cycle, and people are trying to make a name for themselves. And it brought up a really interesting question in my mind of how much of this is purely just spectacle.
Yeah, in fact, I think a lot of it is, and you look at the folks who are leading the charge against McCarthy, and this is no endorsement of Kevin McCarthy for Speaker, but you look at the Matt Gaetzes of the world, right, and the Marjorie Taylor Greens and the other ones, and what's their purpose? Is it to actually improve how the chamber works, or do they have some policy in mind that they want to see moved towards, or are they just trying to do some grandstanding and help their fundraising for the next time around? Right? I think Jim Jordan, as we've talked about, the person who nominated McCarthy on the second ballot, used to be a McCarthy opponent. Now they've seemed to be more aligned. He gave a really good speech from the Republican perspective on what should happen in this next Congress. And so my point is, there's a difference between Jordan and the other ones, right? Who are maybe just trying to stand in the way of McCarthy. I don't know what they want. It's not clear to I don't think anybody what their end game is besides stopping Kevin McCarthy from becoming Speaker.
Ironically enough, as much as we heard about, hey, let's all take action on the House floor and have these debates on the House floor, a lot of these discussions happening behind closed doors, as tends to happen in both parties. Dave, thank you as always for joining us.
You got it. Thanks for having me.